He hadn't spoken to his daughter in over 10 years, and now, lying on his deathbed, he believed he would die alone. But when a black nurse began to sing a simple hymn at his side, something happened no one expected. Because the moment her voice filled that hospital room, his estranged daughter walked in. And what unfolded next would change all of their lives forever. Before we dive in, tell us, have you ever been through something like this yourself? Share in the comments because your story might inspire someone else. And don't forget to subscribe for more powerful true stories. The hospital was too quiet. The kind of quiet that presses on your chest, making every tick of the clock echo louder than it should. Inside room 304, the air smelled faintly of antiseptic and sadness. Machines beeped in patient rhythm, monitoring the fragile heartbeat of Edward Harrison. Once a titan of business, now just another man whose body was failing him. Edward's face was pale, his lips cracked, his breathing shallow. Tubes and wires tangled around him like chains, binding him to life he no longer fully controlled. His once proud shoulders now sagged under the weight of time and regret. He had lived a life many envied, towering office buildings, expensive suits, cars that turned heads on city streets. His name carried weight in boardrooms, but here, in this sterile room, none of that mattered. Because the one thing he wanted most, the one person he longed to see, wasn't there. Lena, his daughter, his only child. Gone for more than a decade. They hadn't spoken since the night their world fell apart. Words had been shouted, doors slammed, promises shattered. Pride had replaced love. Anger had replaced forgiveness. And slowly the silence had grown so heavy that neither one of them dared to break it. Now, staring at the ceiling tiles, Edward felt the weight of his choices. He had built an empire but lost his family. The irony was cruel. At his side stood Angela Brooks, a nurse who had seen more endings than beginnings in her years of service. A black woman in her early 40s, she carried herself with quiet strength, the kind that didn't need words to be felt. Her dark eyes held a gentleness that many patients clung to in their final hours. Angela had seen this before. The lonely ones, the patients with money but no visitors, with resumes full of accolades but lives empty of love. It always broke her heart, though she had learned to hide it behind professional calm. But Edward was different. His silence wasn't just fear of death, it was regret. And Angela understood regret. Her own life had been a series of sacrifices. She had given up dreams, let go of relationships, poured herself into her work. She knew what it felt like to wonder if the chance to heal old wounds had already slipped away. So when Edward's breathing grew ragged, his chest rising and falling in uneven waves, Angela did something unusual. She didn't call the doctor right away. She didn't adjust the machines. Instead, she sang. Her voice was soft at first, trembling as though afraid to disturb the silence. But the melody was steady, familiar, warm. It was an old gospel hymn, one her grandmother used to sing when Angela was a little girl afraid of the dark, a song about grace, about being lost and found again. The words floated through the room, weaving between the beeping machines, filling the cold air with something human, something holy. Edward's eyes flickered. He turned his head ever so slightly toward the sound. His lips parted, though no words came. For the first time in days, the deep lines on his face softened. Angela kept singing, her hand resting gently on his frail arm. She wasn't thinking about wealth or titles or mistakes. She was thinking about comfort, about dignity, about the simple truth that no one should feel alone in their last moments. And then, the door creaked open. Angela's voice caught for a split second before steadying again. Standing in the doorway was a woman in her 30s, her posture stiff, her eyes wide with disbelief. She froze as though she had stumbled into a dream. Her lips parted, and a whisper escaped before she could stop it. That song. My mother used to sing that to me. Angela turned her head, slowly, her voice trailing off. Edward's eyes snapped open, wider than they had been in days. His chest rose, trembling with the effort, as he forced the words through weak, cracked lips. Lena. The woman's hand trembled against the doorframe. Tears shimmered in her eyes, her jaw clenched tight, as though she was holding back years of emotions that threatened to break free. Angela stepped back, her gaze shifting between father and daughter. The air in the room grew heavy, electric, as though time itself had paused to watch. Because this wasn't just a hospital room anymore. This was a battlefield, not of machines and medicine, but of love, pride, and forgiveness. And the war had just begun. Lena stood frozen in the doorway, as if crossing the threshold would somehow trap her in a past she had tried so hard to escape. Her father's voice, weak, trembling, yet unmistakable, still hung in the air. "Little Lena," her chest tightened. 10 years. 10 years since she had heard him say her name. And yet hearing it now, she wasn't a woman in her 30s anymore. She was a teenager again, standing in the middle of a mansion's grand hallway, her voice hoarse from shouting, her eyes stinging from tears as she told him she was leaving, and he had let her go. Angela, sensing the weight of the moment, stepped quietly back, folding her hands in front of her. She had seen many reunions, some tender, some brutal. She knew better than to interfere too quickly. Sometimes the most powerful thing a nurse could do was simply hold space. Edward struggled to lift his hand, fingers trembling like brittle twigs. His face crumpled as tears formed in his eyes. "You came," he whispered. But Lena didn't move closer. She didn't run to his side. Instead, her jaw tightened. "Don't," she said sharply, her voice cracking under the strain of emotion. "Don't act like this is some miracle. You don't get to cry now." The words sliced through the sterile air, sharper than any scalpel. Edward flinched, guilt flashing across his pale face. His hand dropped back to the bed, his chest rising and falling unevenly. Angela's heart ached at the sight. She looked at Lena, the tension in her shoulders, the way she stood stiffly, like she was holding up a wall that had taken years to build. Behind that wall was pain, and Angela recognized it. "I didn't think," Edward's voice faltered. He swallowed hard. "That you'd ever want to see me again." Lena let out a bitter laugh, though her eyes glistened with unshed tears. "You're right, I didn't. Not after what you did." The room fell silent again. The only sound was the soft beeping of the monitor, marking time that was slipping away too quickly. Angela's fingers twitched at her side. She wanted to speak, to tell them not to waste this moment. But she held her tongue. She had learned long ago that families needed to bleed out their words before healing could begin. Edward turned his head slightly, his breathing shallow. His voice cracked as he forced the words. "I made mistakes, Lena. Too many to count. I thought I was protecting you, providing for you, but I pushed you away." "Pushed me away?" Lena snapped, stepping into the room now, her heels clicking against the floor like tiny hammers striking stone. She stopped at the foot of the bed, glaring down at him. "You didn't push me away, Dad. You abandoned me. You chose your company, your reputation, your pride, over your own daughter. And when I needed you most, you weren't there." Edward closed his eyes as if her words pierced deeper than the pain in his failing body. "I know," he whispered. "I know." Angela shifted her weight, watching Lena's hands shake as she wrapped her arms around herself. This wasn't just anger. It was grief. The grief of a daughter who had lived a decade without a father's love. "I was 18, Lena continued, her voice breaking now. 18, and Mom was gone, and I was lost, and you were supposed to be there, but all you cared about was running your empire, making sure the world saw you as some untouchable giant. Meanwhile, your daughter was falling apart, and you didn't even notice." Her voice cracked on the last words, tears spilling down her cheeks. Edward's lips trembled. "I noticed," he said weakly. "God, Lena, I noticed, but I didn't know how to fix it. Every time I tried to reach out, it came out wrong, and when you left, I thought giving you space was what you wanted." "What I wanted," she spat, "what I wanted was my father. Not space, not silence, not 10 years of nothing." The rawness of her words filled the room, and Angela felt her own throat tighten. She knew too well the pain of absence. She had grown up with a father who had walked out when she was young, leaving her mother to carry the weight of the world. She had promised herself she would never let bitterness take root. But watching Lena now, she realized how easily it could. Edward coughed, his body trembling with the effort. Angela instinctively stepped forward, adjusting his pillow, checking the lines to ensure nothing was dislodged. "Easy, Mr. Harrison," she said softly. He looked up at her, eyes glistening with gratitude, and then turning back to his daughter, he whispered, "I don't deserve your forgiveness. I know that. But I need you to know, I never stopped loving you." Lena shook her head, tears streaking her cheeks. "Love? You can't just say that now, not when it's too late." Angela's heart clenched at those words. Too late. How many times had she heard that phrase in these halls? How many families had waited until the very end to face their brokenness, only to realize they had let years slip by? She took a small step forward, her voice gentle. "Sometimes it feels too late," she said softly, looking at Lena. "But the truth is, as long as there's breath, there's still a chance." Lena's eyes snapped toward her, as if only now realizing the nurse wasn't just a background figure. She blinked rapidly, struggling to process both the fury burning inside her and the unexpected kindness of a stranger who had witnessed their pain. Angela didn't push further. She knew the seed was planted. Now it was up to them. Edward reached out again, his hand trembling. "Please, just sit with me. Just for a moment." Lena's feet felt glued to the floor. She wanted to turn and run, to protect herself from the avalanche of emotions threatening to bury her. But another part of her, a part she thought had died years ago, ached to take his hand. Angela watched, silent, her own breath caught in her chest. She had seen many endings, but something about this one felt different. Something told her this wasn't just about a dying man. This was about a choice, a moment where a daughter could decide whether to let bitterness define her story or whether love, however late, could still break through. And she knew. The next words, the next move, would change everything. Lena's body trembled as though caught between two storms, the storm of anger that had burned inside her for a decade, and the storm of grief she had spent just as long trying to suppress. Her father's hand still hovered, frail and shaking, a silent plea hanging in the space between them. She didn't take it. Not yet. Instead, she drew a shaky breath and turned her face away. "I shouldn't even be here," she whispered. "I told myself I was done with this." Edward's eyelids fluttered. His voice was no more than a rasp. "Then, why did you come?" The question lingered like smoke. Lena's throat tightened. Why had she come? She had ignored the phone calls from the hospital, the letters marked urgent. She had told herself she wouldn't give him the satisfaction of seeing her again. And yet, when she heard the voicemail 2 days ago, when the nurse's voice on the other end said her father might not survive the week, her heart had cracked. Just a little. Against her better judgment, she had gotten in her car, driven 3 hours, and found herself standing here now, staring at the man who had once been her whole world, and then her deepest wound. Angela, still at the bedside, watched the silent battle unfold. She had seen many patients left alone because pride kept their families away. But here was a chance. Fragile, delicate, but real. "Sometimes we don't know why we show up," Angela said softly, looking at Lena. "But we do, and maybe that's enough for now." Lena swallowed hard, blinking away the tears clouding her vision. She wanted to protest, to say it wasn't enough, that years of absence couldn't be erased by a single visit. But the words caught in her throat. Edward coughed again, his chest heaving. Angela leaned forward, adjusting the oxygen tube, her movements efficient but tender. Edward's hand brushed against hers, and he whispered hoarsely, "Please, I need her to know." Angela frowned, glancing at him. "Know what?" Edward's eyes shifted back to his daughter. "The truth." Lena crossed her arms tightly across her chest. The truth? Now you want to tell me the truth? After 10 years of silence? Edward's lips trembled, his breath rattling. You never understood why I pushed you away. I wasn't protecting myself, Lena. I was trying to protect you. Her brow furrowed, her voice laced with anger and confusion. Protect me from what? He closed his eyes briefly, as if summoning the strength. Then with effort, he forced the words. From my world, from the people I dealt with, from the weight of my name. I thought if you hated me, you'd be free. Lena stared at him, stunned. Free? Free from what? You think being ignored by your own father felt like freedom? It felt like abandonment. Edward's hand trembled as it gripped the blanket. His voice broke. You don't know the enemies I made. The rivals who would have used you to hurt me. I thought, if I cut you out of my world, you'd be safe. I thought I was saving you. But all I did was lose you. Angela's heart clenched. She had seen fathers protect their families in misguided ways, but rarely at such a cost. Lena shook her head, her tears spilling freely now. All I wanted was my dad, not his money, not his empire, just him. Silence hung heavy, broken only by the beeping machine marking Edward's faltering heart. And then Angela noticed something. A small folder on the bedside table, half hidden under medical charts. She picked it up gently, glancing at Edward. Is this what you wanted her to know? Edward nodded weakly. Show her. Angela hesitated, then handed the folder to Lena. Her hands shook as she opened it. Inside were documents, old letters, legal papers, photographs. Her eyes scanned the first page and her breath caught. It was a trust set up in her name, millions of dollars, untouched, waiting for her. Lena's knees buckled, and she sank into the chair by the bed. What? What is this? Edward's voice was barely audible now. Everything I built, it's yours, always was. I just never knew how to give it without losing you. So I left it there, waiting. Her hands trembled as she flipped through the pages. Pictures of her childhood tucked between the documents. Photos she hadn't seen in years. Birthday parties, school plays, candid moments with her mother. And at the back, a stack of letters, unopened, unsent, all addressed to her. Lena's chest tightened as she pulled one out. In her father's handwriting, to my daughter, the day I finally find the courage to tell you the truth. Tears blurred her vision as she looked back at him. Why didn't you send these? Why didn't you ever just call? Edward's eyes glistened. Because I was a coward. I thought I had time. I thought one day I'd fix it. And then the days turned into years. And now, his voice cracked. Now I don't know if I have enough left. Angela placed a steady hand on Lena's shoulder, grounding her in the storm. Lena shook her head, her heart torn between rage and grief. Do you know what it's like to grow up thinking you weren't enough? That your own father didn't care? Edward's lips trembled. Every day, because I cared too much, and I let that fear destroy us. The monitor beeped faster for a moment, his breathing shallow. Angela leaned forward, checking the vitals. We need to keep him calm, she said firmly. But Edward's gaze locked onto his daughter, desperate. Please, Lena, don't let my mistakes be the end of our story. Lena's hands clutched the letters, her tears falling onto the pages. The fortress of anger she had built for a decade began to crack. And for the first time in years, she reached out, her trembling fingers brushing against his frail hand. His eyes widened, filling with tears as though that single touch was the forgiveness he had prayed for. Angela stepped back quietly, her own eyes misting. She had seen many miracles in these halls, but not the kind measured in heartbeats or charts. This was different. This was the miracle of a family finding its way back, at the very edge of goodbye. And as Lena sat by her father's side, clutching his hand in the letters of a decade's worth of regret, she whispered through her tears, "I don't know if I can forgive you. Not yet. But I'm here." Edward's lips curved into the faintest smile, his chest trembling with relief. "That's all I ever wanted." Angela turned toward the window, giving them a moment of privacy. Outside, the sun was beginning to rise, casting golden light into the sterile room. A new day. A fragile, precious new day. The morning sun spilled into room 304, painting the white hospital walls with streaks of gold. For a moment, the sterile room felt warmer, softer, like life itself had decided to pause and give this family a little grace. Lena sat by her father's bedside, clutching his frail hand in both of hers. His skin was cool, his grip weak, but it was contact. Real, undeniable contact. The first in over 10 years. Edward's eyes fluttered open, and he looked at her as if he were memorizing her face for the last time. "You look just like your mother," he whispered, voice cracking. The words sliced through Lena's heart, reopening an ache she had buried deep. "Don't," she said softly, her voice trembling. "Don't bring her into this." But Edward shook his head. "She would have wanted this. She always told me, no matter what happened, I had to keep you close. And I failed her. I failed both of you." His eyes welled with tears, and for once Lena didn't turn away. Angela, standing near the window, felt her own chest tighten. She remembered her grandmother's words. "Sometimes God gives you one last chance to make things right, and it may not look the way you expect." Watching father and daughter now, she knew she was witnessing one of those chances. Edward struggled to lift his other hand, gesturing weakly toward the folder of documents Lena still clutched. That's yours. All of it. The company, the estate, everything." Lena shook her head, her grip tightening on his hand. "I don't care about that, Dad. I never did. I just wanted you." Her words hit him harder than any illness. His chest rose and fell unevenly, his voice breaking. "And now, you have me. For as long as I've got left." The room grew quiet, the steady beeping of the heart monitor marking time that everyone knew was slipping too fast. Angela stepped forward, placing a gentle hand on Lena's shoulder. "Can I say something?" she asked softly. Lena looked up at her, eyes red from crying, and nodded. Angela's voice was calm but carried weight. "I've seen many families come through these halls. Some leave with closure, some don't. But the ones who find peace, they're the ones who let love speak louder than regret." She looked from Lena to Edward. "It's not about erasing the past. It's about deciding, in this moment, what kind of ending you want." Lena swallowed hard, staring at her father. She wanted to scream at him, to let all the years of pain pour out. But at the same time, she wanted to hold on, to not waste what little time they had left. Tears streamed down her cheeks as she whispered, "I don't know how to forgive you. Not yet. But I don't want to leave things like this." Edward's lips curved into the faintest smile. "Then don't," he whispered. For the first time in years, Lena leaned closer, resting her forehead gently against his. His breath was shallow, but the warmth was still there. She closed her eyes, letting the tears fall freely, and whispered, "I'm here, Dad. I'm not leaving you again." Edward exhaled a shaky breath, as if those words had given him a peace he had been searching for all along. Angela turned away, giving them space, her own eyes misting. She had always believed her job was to heal bodies, but over the years she realized the deeper truth. Sometimes her calling was to heal hearts. Minutes passed in silence, broken only by the sound of soft crying and the hum of machines. Then Edward spoke again, his voice faint but steady. "Angela?" She turned, surprised to hear him call her by name. "Yes, Mr. Harrison?" He gave her a weak smile. "Thank you for singing, for staying, for giving me the courage to face her." His eyes glistened. "You don't know what you've done." Angela's throat tightened, but she managed to smile. "I didn't do anything, sir. You did. You chose to let love in. He nodded faintly, then turned back to Lena. Promise me, you'll take care of yourself. Promise me you won't let anger steal any more of your life. Lena's sobs shook her shoulders. She gripped his hand tighter. I promise. His eyelids grew heavy, his breath slower. Angela moved quietly, checking his vitals. The numbers were dropping. She glanced at Lena, her eyes gentle. It's time, Angela whispered. Lena's heart pounded. No, no, not yet, please. Angela placed a steady hand on her back. He's been waiting for this moment, Lena. Not to die, but to see you again, to hear you say you're here. You gave him that. Edward's eyes fluttered open one last time. His lips parted, and in the faintest breath he whispered, I love you, Lena. Her tears fell onto his hand as she whispered back, I love you too, Dad. And with that, Edward Harrison, billionaire, tycoon, empire builder, took his final breath, not as a businessman, not as a powerful name, but simply as a father, holding his daughter's hand. The monitor flatlined, its shrill tone filling the room. Lena collapsed against his chest, her sobs echoing through the sterile walls. Angela quickly silenced the machine, her hands trembling as she pulled the sheet up gently. She had done this countless times, but this time felt different. Because this wasn't just death. It was redemption. Angela placed a hand on Lena's shoulder, steady and strong. You gave him peace, she said softly. That's a gift many never get. Lena lifted her tear-streaked face, clutching the folder of letters and documents. I don't care about the money. I don't care about the company. None of it matters. She looked at Angela, her voice breaking. But these letters, they matter. They prove he tried. Even if he failed, he tried. Angela nodded. And now it's up to you what comes next. Silence settled again, but this time it wasn't heavy. It was gentle, almost sacred. Lena stood slowly, wiping her tears. She looked at Angela, her voice quiet but filled with something new, something like gratitude. You were the one who sang, weren't you? That's what brought me in. Angela smiled softly. I just did what I always do. Sometimes a song is all it takes to remind us we're not alone. Lena's lips trembled as she gave a small nod. No, you did more than that. You gave me back my father, for one last moment. Angela swallowed hard, her eyes glistening. She didn't often let herself cry on duty, but this time she didn't fight it. The two women stood together in that small hospital room, one grieving, one comforting, bound forever by the final chapter of a man they both had touched in different ways. Outside, the city stirred awake, cars rushing by, people heading to work, the world spinning forward as if nothing had changed. But for Lena and Angela, everything had. Lena clutched the folder to her chest, not as a trophy, not as wealth, but as proof that even broken love could still leave behind traces of hope. And Angela, she walked out of room 304 knowing once again why she had chosen this path. Not for paychecks, not for recognition, but for moments like this. Moments where compassion could bridge years of silence, heal wounds deeper than illness, and remind the world of one simple truth, that sometimes the most powerful medicine is love. 3 months later. The city skyline glittered with evening lights, tall buildings piercing the night sky like monuments to ambition. Among them stood Harrison Tower, the glass and steel giant Edward had once poured his life into. But tonight the building wasn't just a monument to power. It was something new, something softer. Inside the grand lobby, hundreds of people gathered beneath a banner that read, The Harrison Foundation for Compassion in Healthcare. Lena stood at the podium, her hands trembling as she adjusted the microphone. She wore a simple black dress, not glamorous, not corporate, just dignified. Around her neck hung a small locket, inside of which was a faded photo of her as a child with her parents. She scanned the crowd. Doctors, nurses, patients, community leaders, all gathered to witness the launch of something her father would never have imagined. Taking a deep breath, Lena began. My father, Edward Harrison, was a man of great success, but he was also a man of great mistakes. For years we were estranged. We lost more than a decade to pride, to silence, to regret. Her voice wavered, but she steadied herself. In his final moments, I had the chance to sit with him, to hear him say words I thought I'd never hear again, to say words I never thought I'd speak again. I love you. The audience grew silent, some wiping tears from their eyes. And that moment, Lena continued, was made possible by one person, a nurse named Angela Brooks. Angela, seated in the front row in her crisp white uniform, froze, eyes wide with surprise. She hadn't expected to be mentioned. Lena's eyes found hers. She sang to my father when he was alone. She gave him peace when no medicine could. And that song, it brought me into the room at the exact right time. Without her, I would never have had that final moment with him. Angela lowered her gaze, humbled, tears welling in her eyes. Lena's voice grew firm. That's why this foundation exists, to honor compassion in healthcare, to ensure that no patient dies alone, to remind us all that healing is not only physical, it is emotional, spiritual, human. The crowd erupted in applause. Later, after the ceremony, Angela quietly tried to slip out of the building. She wasn't one for the spotlight, but Lena caught up to her at the entrance. You were leaving without saying goodbye, Lena said, smiling softly. Angela shrugged, a little embarrassed. I didn't want to take up space. This was your night. Lena shook her head. No, this was our night. You're part of this story now, Angela, forever. For a moment, the two women simply looked at each other. One the daughter of a man redeemed in his final moments. The other the nurse whose voice had bridged a decade of silence. Lena reached out, taking Angela's hand. You changed my life, and you didn't even know it. Angela's lips curved into a gentle smile. Sometimes, the smallest acts echo the loudest. They stood together in the doorway of Harrison Tower, the city lights glowing around them. The story had begun in a cold hospital room. It ended here, in hope, in healing, in legacy. Because in the end, it wasn't wealth or power that changed everything. It was a song, a daughter's return, and a nurse's compassion. And that was enough to change a life forever.